The following stories tell the tale of 2 teens and 1 preteen who took the lives of their own siblings. We have a boy who killed his brother over Halloween candy, a 15-year-old boy who called 911 after his brother to death, and a 12-year-old who is convicted of his little sister, yet maintains his innocence.
My grandson evidently himself last night. He's cold. You can't move him.
The people off behind us watching with binoculars and stuff.
Okay, do you know what happened?
No, I don't. His head is back. His eyes are open.
I don't know.
Had his head covered.
His head was covered?
Yeah, he had the blanket up over his face.
That horrifying recording was the voice of Jonah Pulliam, calling 911 after having found her grandson. His name was Harley Starling, and he was just 14 years old. It happened to be Halloween morning that day in the year of 2016. Jonah would soon find out this whole situation was actually even more tragic than it seemed at the time. The story starts the night before on Halloween Eve at the Starling family residence. Harley and his brother 16-year-old Nicholas are at home with their grandmother and her boyfriend. Their family were watching Halloween movies in anticipation for the next day. It was just a normal night. But Jonah would wake up the next morning and she would be confronted with horror. She went to Harley's bedroom to wake him up, but the door was locked and he was unresponsive. When she goes to get inside the room, she finds Harley blue and cold.
Were there any weapons around or anything?
I don't know if he was playing with fake or what. There's stuff. There's like the fake stuff all over his arm and up around his shoulder.
And you said his eyes are open too?
Yes. I shook him because I was trying to wake him up. His dad just 2 years ago.
Okay. Are there any guns in the house that you know of?
Yes, but he can't get to them.
Okay. Do you live here with them, or how?
They live with me. They've lived with me since their dad.
And what was?
It was in November.
Did you hear anything weird last night or anything?
No.
Okay.
He just went to bed and that was it.
Jonah was confident at the time that Harley had taken his own life. The boys had a rough start to their life with their father being and their mother rarely coming around. But as time passed and more details emerged, it would turn out to not be as straightforward as it seemed. Police started by interviewing each individual that had been in the house that night.
Sets the scene for detectives, describing the moments that led to her discovering Harley in his bed.
We kind of left the room at the same time. Okay. I said, "Good night, I love you." He said, "I love you." And I went in my room, he went in his room.
Okay. And then you heard Nick up a couple times throughout the night?
Yeah, I heard it squeak, the door.
The door squeak?
Yeah. Okay. Because if the cat wants out, he'll go jump on you.
Okay.
The next morning when she woke up, she saw Nick coming out of the bathroom, and he was offered to go wake up Harley. But when he got there, he found the door locked, which was unusual.
So then I went and got the key, and I unlocked the door.
Okay.
It was only then that she made the horrific discovery of what was inside. Jonah then revealed to the police that she had cameras inside of the home, and that she had seen Nick moving around in the night. But this wasn't necessarily unusual, as he could have been going to the bathroom or getting a drink of water. For the most part, Jonah seems pretty calm and upbeat, despite being a grandmother who just walked in and discovered her grandson. But this is likely because she is still in shock, and the reality of what has happened hasn't clicked for her yet. But what the police reveal next is enough to get her to break down.
Well, there's really no easy way to go about this part. The autopsy, they're still working on it, actually, as we speak. Okay? Well, what we do know is that we're not investigating a homicide. Okay, he didn't hurt himself.
The injury that he's sustained could not have been self-inflicted.
What happened?
We're not entirely sure yet. We're still trying to piece everything together. Any reason to think that your boyfriend would do something like this?
No.
How about Nick?
I wouldn't believe that Nick would do it either.
The possibility?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
What's interesting about this interview is that Jonah seems 100% certain that her boyfriend would not hurt Harley, but With Nick, she seems less confident. She went on to say that she had cared for Nick since he was just a baby, and things hadn't always been easy.
They've had rough in and out, because, their dad dying, and I found out he didn't allow him to have any friends, and Harley was trying to make friends with everybody at school. Sure.
The news that this is not a matter of is clearly shocking to Jonah, and she struggled to process this information.
I went from trying to figure out why he would stuff to who would kill him and why. What would they advance? There's no advantage to it.
It doesn't make any sense to us either, okay? So that's why we're trying to figure out what the hell happened, because we don't know.
Who would want to kill a young child, and what would they possibly have to gain? Police needed to find out if someone had invaded the home and killed Harley, or if this was an inside job. Now that the police have gotten all the information they could out of Jonah, it was time to turn their attention to Nick.
When you went to bed, was anybody else still up?
Well, as far as I can tell, everyone was going to sleep.
Okay.
Well, then about 11:30, I gone and got the dog, took him out. And then later, I got back up because I didn't sleep until I got the dogs back in.
Okay.
After I woke up.
Did you leave your door open or closed?
Open.
Open? Okay, so if anybody else is up moving around or anything like that, you would know that. Great? Okay.
Nick appears to be taking pretty long pauses as he answers his questions. This could be considered unusual because at this point, the questions that are being asked are not that difficult and should not require that much thought. Another strange thing is that he hasn't once asked what happened to Harley. When asked about the morning in which Harley's body was discovered, Nick doesn't get emotional and keeps the same monotone voice. He says that he woke up around 5 in the morning, went to the bathroom, and then went into his brother's room.
Said, Harley, it's time for you to take a bath. He didn't answer.
Notice that his tone changes when discussing Harley. Until now, we've heard a mostly monotone Nicholas, but now, just like that, he sounds almost agitated when he speaks Harley's name.
Another interesting thing to notice about Nick at this point is that he's turned so he's not directly facing the detective. This is often a sign that someone is not telling the truth.
Well, after I was done trying to get him out, I told Grandma that he wasn't responding.
Okay, did you go into his room at any time before you woke Grandma up?
No.
Okay.
Well, she moves through a key. She finds the key to his bedroom. She opens it, tells him, or says it's time for you to get up, starts to walk away. I tell Grandma that he's not rude for her. She comes in here thinking it's a prank. Like she is. Window open, I shut it.
How far open?
Like about here.
Okay.
These are the curtains that hung in Harley's room blocking the window. But if his brother is unresponsive, why would Nick's first instinct be to worry about the window? This is possibly because he wants the police to think an intruder got in from that window, and that's what happened to Harley. Nick's behavior seems to get even more suspicious when the detectives bring up the idea of searching his room.
Okay. What would you be concerned about going in and finding?
I haven't really trusted people that way.
I understand that.
Because of the Fourth Amendment, the police would not be able to search Nick's room without his permission until they obtained a warrant. But they can continue to press him to see why he would hesitate to allow them inside of his room.
Well, Grandma did give us a baseball bat in case anyone tried to break into it.
Sure. Well, I understand that. Other than that, anything? I mean, is there or something you're concerned about or anything like that?
But I just don't want you to be freaked out about the game I have Splat House.
The game that has a lot of...
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is it okay if we check your room?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most people just find that type of game disturbing.
Surely Nick doesn't think some video game was going to matter to the police when they had a murder investigation to solve. There had to be something more.
Don't be disturbed by my background pictures either.
I'm not even going to look at it. Don't you even worry about it.
I did.
Okay.
or my music.
These officers were on the front by me to take anything they find of evidentiary value. Okay, so that means that they find something specific that would be, would have been used in your brother's death or something like anything like that they'll find in there. What?
Just the badge.
Okay.
I forgot. The pants I wore for trick-or-treating.
Did the badge cause your brother?
No.
Okay, well then, why were so? Okay.
At this point, the police likely already know what weapon was used to kill Harley, but asking Nick if a bat was used is done in order to get his reaction to the question and see if he knows more than what is leading on. He also mentioned some pants, which he says were covered in fake blood for Halloween. Meanwhile, Jonah and another family member are able to reunite in another room and discuss what has happened.
By who? I don't know. I kind of figured he was because Mom, nothing was making sense. They couldn't find a gun. They have to have a weapon. It has to be there.
The police leave Nick in a room alone for nearly an hour so they can survey his body language. He appears still and doesn't seem to be anxious. This could be due to the fact that Nick was likely on the autism spectrum. However, it is important to note that most people who are autistic are not violent. Finally, the detectives re-enter the room to further their questioning. Before they do, they read him his Miranda rights.
You guys are hanging out, you're watching movies. Everything good? You guys getting along okay yesterday? You not upset with each other? Did you guys get in a fight about anything?
We didn't really argue.
Okay. Were you mad at each other?
No, but airs.
Yeah. What did you guys argue about?
Who could get the last piece of chocolate cookies?
That's right. As shocking as it may be, the argument and tension between the two had been over a box of chocolates containing maraschino cherries that their grandmother had gotten for them. Nick claimed that Harley ate most of the chocolates despite the fact that their grandmother had given them to be shared. This doesn't seem like nearly enough to cause someone to kill another person, so the police dig deeper to try to see if there's more that could have been going on. That's when he revealed that he had trouble sleeping at night because he was sad.
What were you sad about? You mind telling me?
I was hanging a question, remember, and that's what my dad.
Finally, this is shining more light upon what Nick must have been thinking or feeling that night. Police now reach a point in questioning where they are starting to get more aggressive.
We need you to be honest with us about something.
Like what?
Well, about what might have happened there last night.
What Nick doesn't know at the time is that the police found a bat in the yard of the Starling home. When they confront him with this information, he doesn't seem particularly shocked and denies putting it there. They then bring up the jeans.
We found some jeans with some in the house. Were those your jeans?
Yeah.
Did you change your pants last night?
Yeah.
Is someone longer?
Yeah.
Police then get into the gory details of how Harley was to see if they can get some sort of reaction from Nick.
I was very, very angry at him. That crack split open.
But he still appears calm. He eventually seemed to become defensive when the detective commented on the fact that the way Harley was similar to what went on in the video game Nick had mentioned earlier.
Just because I play a violent video game doesn't mean I'm a violent person.
Police continue to press him, letting him know that they don't believe he's as innocent as he claims to be.
Nicholas, I can tell you're not being honest. Everything about you and your body language tells us that you're not being honest. You were sure it doesn't hurt you. Okay?
Hey,
We just want to know the truth about what happened so we can solve this for your grandma and your family. Okay?
At this point, seemingly trying to take the conversation in a different direction, he decides to own up to something unrelated. He brings up the fact that the family cat, Mittens, was found in the house with a string tied around his neck. He initially denied doing that, but now confesses it was him.
that's because I found out she was So this stuff under my desk is like my games.
The cat with the string around its neck might not initially seem like a big deal, but when you consider how many future killers start out by abusing animals, it put things into perspective a little more. Finally, the police tell Nick straight out they believe he killed his little brother.
This is what I think. You want to know my opinion? What? I think you went in there, you were pissed at him, and then you went back and forth between the bathroom, cleaned yourself up, and changed your clothes. The pants we found, for years you were wearing them, and that's got your brother. You took them off, so nobody would find them.
So, Nick holds on to his innocence for as long as he can.
I didn't kill him.
But the detectives double down, saying that they know that Nick is the killer, but what he didn't know was why. This is when Nick finally starts being honest, and he confesses to the murder.
How does he treat you, correct? How does he pick up? So did you in the head while he was sleeping? Did he know you were coming? He was asleep, or was he awake? And you just took that back and hit him over the head? Alright. Yeah.
Despite what Nick has just revealed, he still doesn't seem very emotional. When asked how many times he hit Harley with the bat, he says between 14 and 15 times. Things aren't looking good for Nick at this point, especially because he has admitted that his brother was asleep at the time of the attack. This means he cannot claim self-defense.
Did you stab him with something in the neck?
Well, that kind of started me.
Were you trying to help him bastards or do something?
I'm trying to make him be quiet.
He would later admit that he stabbed his brother to get him to stop making noise. He then took the bat and dropped it over the fence in the backyard. But not only that, after cleaning up the mess, he then went to his room and went back to sleep. Nick would also say that when he entered Harley's room, he stood there and watched him sleep for about 10 minutes before deciding to carry on with the attack. This shows that there was premeditation involved. Now the police have a confession, and they just need to figure out where the other weapon is.
Hey, we were trying to figure out the knife, okay? Because you told me that after you stabbed him, you went into the bathroom and you washed the knife off, right? Okay. So then you come back and you said after you cleaned it off, did you put it back in here, or did you go take it and put it directly into your bag?
Police then had the horrific task of telling poor Jonah that it wasn't some home intruder that killed her grandson. It was, in fact, her other grandson. They then let Nick know that he would soon be under arrest and gave him one last opportunity to see his grandma and aunt before that happened.
They're not mad. To her. Okay. To her for a number of reasons.
When Nick agrees, his grandma and aunt enter the room. Despite everything, his grandmother meets him with an embrace. This is a very tragic scene and hard to watch as Jonah appears completely broken.
I don't know why you got so much brother.
It is not until after they leave that Nick breaks down and sobs. Nick was then arrested and taken to prison. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Because of how severe the murder was, it was decided Nick would be tried as an adult. He later changed his plea to guilty and was convicted. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. This was considered a rather controversial case, not only because of Nick's young age, but also his potential mental delays. If you thought this story was horrific, stay tuned for this next one.
Late this afternoon, a state board granted parole for Zach Whitman, a man who confessed to killing his brother in 1998. WGAL News 8's Ed Weinstock joins us with new information.
Under the parole board decision, Zachary Whitman will be paroled after May the 21st, as long as he meets conditions set down by the state. In 2003, Zachary Whitman was found guilty of first-degree in the 1998 slashing murder of his younger brother Greg, who was 13. Zachary was 15. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
For the most part, the Whitmans began as a normal, happy family until their lives were struck by unimaginable tragedy, the loss of their young son, Greg. Greg's mother took the time to look back upon happier days before the loss occurred.
That's a good memory.
When she did the dance. What, this? No. How would you describe that?
I'd never loved a man before. I liked a lot of guys. I never was in love before. Actually, we met and were married within 6 months. When our boys were born, I was just... thrilled is not the correct word. And I don't believe in miracles, so miracle isn't the correct word. It was just a dream that came true.
When you look at sweet old home videos from the past of brothers Greg and Zach, it's hard to imagine their lives being anything short of beautiful and happy. Unfortunately, just years later, when Greg was 13, his life was cut tragically short. Lisa had memories of when her family was still together, but those who have experienced loss before know the memories are no replacement for the life that has been lost.
You have them, but it's not good enough.
Years ago, back in 2003, the Whitman's son Zach was found guilty of their other son, Greg. However, the parents still believe Zach is innocent, and they blame the media in part for what occurred.
As far as I'm concerned, the media actually committed a crime. They absolutely jumped to conclusions the next day. And so I consider what they did criminal. And another thing that really sticks out in my mind is the fact that the media said that I have raised 2 children. Excuse me, not I. My husband and I have raised 2 children. One is a monster, Zach. One is a great kid, Greg.
This story begins on Friday, October 2nd in 1998 in Pennsylvania. Zach was allowed to stay home from school that day because he wasn't feeling well. Before resting, he stuck a key in the front door of the family home so his brother Greg could let himself in upon returning home. Greg arrived home right on time, and later that afternoon, a close friend of his called the residence, only to have someone pick up and hang up the phone really quickly without saying anything. Sometime after this call, Zach reportedly discovered his brother on the floor, having been a shocking 104 times in his neck and in the upper region of his body. He then called 911.
Listen to me. Is he breathing?
No. No.
He's not breathing?
No.
All right, stay on the phone with me a minute.
What? I gotta call my mom.
Okay, you need to stay on the phone with me for now, okay?
I gotta call my mom.
No, you need to stay on the phone with me.
Okay. Come on.
Zach could be heard sobbing as he spoke on the phone to the dispatcher and begged to call his mother.
And what's your name?
I'm Zach.
Your name is Zach? Your last name?
Whitman.
Whitman.
Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta call my mom. She's
Okay,
at work.
Zach appeared increasingly frustrated the longer it took the ambulance to arrive. When it finally did, he hung up the call. The paramedics and the police arrived and found Zach in a state of shock, covering his hands and sweatshirt. He was taken to the hospital for an evaluation. While police searched the home, they found a very small knife and some gloves buried in the backyard. Just days after, Zach was charged with his brother's. By May of 2003, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His parents never stopped standing by him.
We're allowed to see Zach once a week, and we go virtually every week. And we have been doing that ever since he's been incarcerated over 9 years ago. 52 weeks times 9 years. I would say, no question, it's been over 400.
Despite believing their son to be innocent, the drive to visit him in prison is not easy.
He's definitely turned into a man, and we really didn't get a chance to see that.
Zach's parents have no choice but to constantly relive the details of their son's death because they live in the same home where it occurred.
His throat was here. We know that from the autopsy. He actually collapsed here, and then somehow he was picked up thrown into this table.
Zach's parents believe he was wrongfully convicted after being tried as an adult while he was still just a kid.
So that instead of being a 15-year-old child in front of a jury, he was a 20-year-old man. And in the process, he essentially the parents as well.
Zach's parents still claim his innocence, and he maintained his innocence for 20 years. They visited him regularly in prison.
I would rather be with Zach than not be with Zach, because he's still my son.
And the hardest thing, by far, is the end of the visit, and you know he's going to go, you know, behind those steel doors.
Yeah, you hear that damn steel door slam.
Appeal after appeal seemed to be what the future of this family would be. But this would ultimately not be the end for Zach, despite how much it looked that way. This is due to a change in law that took place in 2016 surrounding being able to sentence those under 18 years old to prison. He ultimately took a plea deal, pleading guilty to third-degree murder. Yes, I can say I killed my brother by he said at the time. He said the whole thing escalated because Greg got mad when Zach hung up on his female friend that called the home. As the fight continued, Zach then reached for the small knife and stabbed his brother to death. Because of the plea deal, he was released from prison in 2019.
I went in and carried my daughter's body out.
In an exclusive interview, Layla Fowler's father speaks about the moment he found his daughter in their Valley Springs home.
Layla Fowler was a bright and beautiful little 8-year-old girl who had her whole life in front of her. Tragically, this young life was snuffed out in 2013 when she was over 20 times, and at the time, the rest of her family, aside from her older brother Isaiah, were away from the family home. Isaiah was the only one there and was the apparent suspect. His own father turned him into the police, but later on, he realized he might have been wrong.
I turned Isaiah in. Most people don't know that. That was hard enough.
He says for 93 days, his son has sat in juvenile hall. He wouldn't answer specific questions about why he believes law enforcement arrested his son, but he did say this about his son.
I was the first one in that house. I saw his demeanor. I've seen the way he carried himself the 2 weeks he was out after that. I don't think he did it.
Isaiah was just 12 years old at the time of the murder. He never confessed to the crime and instead said that an unknown intruder came into the home and killed Layla. His father, stepmother, and older brother all believe he is innocent and have pleaded with the public that anyone who might have information about what happened that tragic day may come forward.
At the beginning, we were talking, we were cooperating, we were doing all the interrogations, all the interviews. We met them every time they wanted to. We would stop what we were doing, go talk to them. And then one day they decided that Isaiah was a suspect and they would no longer talk to us.
Isaiah was found guilty of his sister's murder in June of 2018. At the time of his conviction, the law stated that because he was a minor, he would be released on the day of his 23rd birthday. But the law has since changed, extending that release date until his 25th birthday. His parents have filed an appeal claiming that the release date should remain what it was determined to be on the day of his actual conviction. Meanwhile, Isaiah has stood by his innocence and never agreed to take a plea deal, despite the fact that it could help him legally. And it's not just Isaiah's family that believe he is innocent. A lot of the public does as well. This is because there were unknown fingerprints and DNA found at the crime scene. Also, Isaiah had no cuts or defense wounds on his body. Some believe the police were more worried about closing the case than determining whether or not they had got the right person. Another question would be, what sort of motive would Isaiah have to kill his sister, whom he apparently loved? The family has faced tremendous backlash and hate due to this case, as Isaiah's older brother Justin discussed in an interview.
That, you know, people assume that they raised a monster, as she put it, and you are, I guess, they view you as the brother of a monster. I mean,
yeah, they do.
What's that like? And frankly, why don't you get out of here?
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's very sad. It hurts a lot hearing that, just because I know for a fact that they're not monsters.
Yeah.
None of my siblings are. I am not. We've never raised that way. We were always raised to protect one another.
The family has worked with organizations like the Innocent Project to try to get police to look back into this case, but for now, Isaiah remains behind bars. And there we have it, 3 teens convicted of their siblings. Whether or not all 3 were truly guilty, we may never know.